Is Chris Christie a viable candidate for president?
Well,
in
I always
2016?
shy away from all this speculation. That's a decision he has to make. He's certainly a governor that's been reelected in a big state that gets a lot of attention. That alone.
Would he be a tough competitor?
Oh, he's a tough competitor no matter what he decides to do, and I like Chris Christie. I have a pretty good relationship with him, and I congratulate him on his win. But I think it's important. I know everyone wants to jump to what it means for the future because that's what political reporters do. But I think we need to understand that some of these races don't apply to future races. Every race is different. It has a different set of factors. But I congratulate him on his win. We need as many governors as we can get.
But so are you saying that his win in a blue state like New Jersey wouldn't translate to a more red state or even more of a swing state?
Well, every election is different. I think what would translate across the country is a message that goes to people and says this: look, we know you're struggling. We know you're trying to get ahead. You're doing everything that's been asked of you, and yet your life doesn't seem to be getting better. The only way we're going to be able to make it better is if we abandon the politics of big government and embrace free enterprise and limited government. I think Chris Christie's tried to make that argument in New Jersey. I think Ken Cuccinelli made that argument in Virginia. It worked in one place, it didn't in another because of factors particular to those states. But on a national level, I think that's a winning argument, no matter who our nominee is in 2016, and certainly for our candidates running in 2014.
Along with Dana, I am joined now by former Senator from Arkansas, Blanche Lincoln, chairwoman of the It's My Business Coalition, and CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Kevin Madden. So, Dana, that was an interesting answer.
Sure was.
From Marco Rubio. Oh, I love Chris Christie. But you can't judge anything by New Jersey, not by New Jersey.
New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey.
Yeah,
New
the
Jersey.
elbows are really out already.
Yeah, no, but he likes him a lot. They're good friends, and he'll be a tough competitor. Yes, absolutely. Look, the bottom line is that right now, as you just very nicely displayed there, Chris Christie is the flavor of the month, and he did prove that he can win. And the truth is, he proved that he can win with some of the very demographic groups that Rubio is talking about and has been talking about needing to pull back, like the Latino vote, 51%. Right. Now, it's a pretty big deal that he got that, even in a blue state like New Jersey.
I had a chance to talk to Chris Christie yesterday on Election Day, and I asked him about his place in the GOP right now. I want to play that clip, get your reaction. There are people who think you have fences to mend and bridges to build with Republicans out there. I don't know if you agree with that, but what do you think about that charge? That you need to do more to help Republicans in Washington and elsewhere?
You know, if you go back and look, Jake, I don't think there's been any governor in America who's done more for the NRCC and the NRSC and for the Republican National Committee in terms of traveling around the country, raising money, holding rallies, doing those things than I've done in the last 3 years. So listen, I understand there's some people who got upset because I was doing my job, but they need to learn that about me. You hire me to do a job, I'm going to do the job. And if there are people who are breaking their word to the people that I'm representing, then they're going to hear it from me. And by the same token, with the president, if there's somebody, even of the opposite party, who's doing a really good job on something, and I'm asked about it, I'm going to say they're doing a really good job. And so I don't think I need to fence mend. I think people just have to learn who I am.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Governor Christie doesn't think he needs to fence mend. What do you think?
Look, he built a profile that is very favorable to a lot of Republicans because he's got a relatability and authenticity that our last presidential candidate, Governor Romney, didn't have. But he also built the national profile as somebody who was very quick to criticize Republicans. If you remember, after Sandy, when there was an aid package for Hurricane Sandy relief, he criticized Republicans as being the ones that were holding it up, when in fact it was being held up because so many Democrats had loaded it with pork and congressional Republicans
were trying to hold their ground. That's what he was talking about just then.
So he was so quick to criticize Republicans, and he gained a lot of favor and a lot of love from the mainstream media, as so many of folks within our party like to call you guys. And that put him in a very difficult position with a lot of base voters. But base voters have to remember that we're not going to win if we just talk to ourselves and pat ourselves on the back amongst the base, and that winning Republican, a Republican who can win nationally, is going to be able to secure the base and then also persuade the big middle of the American electorate.
So, Senator Lincoln, you're from Arkansas, obviously.
Yeah.
How does Chris Christie play in the South, do you think?
Well, I think the message that he had, along with a very disciplined message that Terry McAuliffe had, which was back on jobs, was about jobs. And Arkansans like to hear about jobs and growing the economy, and trying to make those kind of differences. And I think that's where he did. I mean, that's how he appealed to regular people, was talking about the jobs that need to be created and putting the economy back on track. But I think he can appeal to a lot of people that way across the country.
What do you think about stylistically? He obviously is from, and I say this as a Philadelphian, he's quite obviously a Yankee. And he's brash and he's pugilistic, not necessarily the style down south. How do you think he would play?
Well, you could add a touch of graciousness, I suppose, in some of those senses. Yeah, that's going to be tough. And I think you're right. I mean, Kevin said it's not going to be translatable everywhere across the country. But that's for the Republicans to deal with.
Well, you know what was very interesting, too, and this is a point that Mark Ambander made in a blog post today, was that the pro-governing message is really an anti-Washington message right now. That is drawing a very stark contrast with the status quo in Washington. People look at Washington and they say nothing's getting done, big solutions aren't being solved. Well, Governor Christie built a profile and did well with so many different demographics that are not traditionally Republican, because he talked about getting things done and what it looks like to govern as a Republican.
But he also did it as governing as a Republican, but governing across party lines. Right. And you know very well, as a moderate Democrat who got in trouble with the base of your own party for reaching out across party lines. Is that bad? I mean, maybe that's back now.
Well, it could be, and that does become a problem, obviously. But the most important thing was the comment that he made on that bus, which was, I was doing my job. And that's what people want more than anything. They want Washington to do its job.
Right, to put party second and
that's exactly right. They don't, they want sensible regulations. They don't want over-government. They want government and politicians to be focusing on growing the economy instead of picking at one another. And I think that when he said, I was just doing my job, that's what they want to see people doing. They want to see politicians, and they want Washington doing its job.
But you know what's interesting, Dan? I saw a tweet from, I think it was Brad Dayspring, Republican official here in town, who said something like, last night he tweeted like, hey, Republicans, we should be celebrating. Yes. We just got reelected in a blue state. But I haven't really seen an effusive pouring out of congratulations from Republicans for Chris Christie, even though he just won a huge margin. And slaughtered his Democratic opponent, won the Latino vote, won the woman vote in New Jersey, running against a Democratic woman, won 30% of Democrats. Yeah. Where are the Republicans? What are you hearing on Capitol Hill?
Look, the reason is because they're nervous. They're nervous. They're nervous about praising somebody who is clearly not a very conservative Republican, because moderate is a dirty word in some circles of the Republican Party, just like some circles of the Democratic Party, and it is a dangerous thing for them to do. That's where the state of the
It's true. We used to celebrate when governors won in places like New York and Massachusetts, and that's the interesting thing right now. And what it is, it's emblematic of the simmering feud between the establishment and the grassroots still.
That's right. You saw it in Alabama.
Right.
And when
That's true.
Senator Lincoln, Dana Bash, Kevin Madden.